When I set up my coaching practice in 2005, it was called Positive Belief. And I called it that because I genuinely thought at that point that positive thinking was all it was going to take to change my life and that of my clients. And I couldn't have been more wrong. Welcome to another episode of Coming to Your Senses, where we navigate the labyrinth of the mind and emerge victorious. And I do want to talk about positive thinking and looking at how positive thinking, that putting on a brave smile, telling yourself everything's fine, it's all going to be okay, it's all going to work itself out, can actually create an internal misalignment and even conflict with yourself and the world that can be counterproductive to what you were actually looking to do. Now, I do want to clarify when I'm talking about this that I am not then talking about the opposite, just be miserable and talk about how shit and ridiculous everything is in the world, which it kind of seems to be pretty much at the moment, but that's a different podcast episode if I ever do that one. But what I want to talk about really is about that forcing a smile, that slapping a positive spin on everything, reframing everything to be great and fine and perfect, and it'll all work out and it'll all be great. Because whilst it can be well intentioned, it's often misused and probably overused as well. And what I've learned the hard way really is that it's not particularly helpful. And I think for me, that hit home quite significantly when I was in hospital. Well, actually, prior to being taken into hospital in 2018. When I think about it now, there was this habit of putting a positive spin on everything actually meant that I was ignoring lots of signs, lots of things that I was ignoring, because everything's going to be fine. It's fine. I'm healthy. I even had the affirmation, I am strong. I am healthy. My body is strong. My body is healthy. And whilst there were elements of that were factual, were correct, it also meant that by that reaffirming and forcing myself to be positive over and over again, that actually I was caught in this fairly arrogant way of thinking, really, that therefore, because I was positive, it meant that I could never be ill, and I certainly could never be put into hospital. And so when I got this number of different symptoms that were just building and building, and nothing was going away, and then I started being I was forgetting to eat because I genuinely wasn't ever getting hungry. So I was losing a lot of weight, which, oh God, that's great, isn't it? Because, skinny is great. And then I started to vomit at random times, not forced. And it was at that point that I thought, you know what, there's something off here. I better go and get it checked. So went and had a number of tests and ended up in hospital. And what I think I've shared this before on the podcast, but I had a non-cancerous tumor, which was the size of a baby's head. It was 15 by 15 by 15 centimeters, which had caused, understandably, internal problems with my organs. And I was in stage 5 kidney failure. The reason I wasn't eating was because my stomach was so small, it wasn't recognizing that it needed anything in it. But the stage 5 kidney failure was obviously a problem. But this positivity all the time, this relentless forcing myself, trying to convince myself that everything was rosy and fine and putting on this image to the world, actually was leading me to a point of close annihilation, really, because it was a cover-up. It was me pretending that everything was fine. I was healthy, when actually it was a disconnect from what was really going on. There was a real pretense that I was going to be fine, everything was going to be fine, rather than acknowledging the truth of what was. And I think that's where, for me, I notice when, especially when I start working with clients initially, coaching clients, is quite often they'll be, oh, I'm very negative, or I'm very positive, or I need to be more positive is a phrase that I hear often. And what I'll often do is say to clients is stick your arms out to the side, just shove them out. As if you're watching this, you can see that I'm doing this. If you're driving, please don't do this. And just choose a hand to look at. And they'll look at a hand, and I will encourage them to stare at that hand fully. So look at whatever side you've got up, look at all the lines and the different skin tones, and then flip it over and look at the other side, and look at all the different shades and what you can see, your veins and everything, wiggle your fingers around. Now, if you're giving that hand, regardless of which hand it is, your full attention, my guess is it will seem as if your other hand doesn't exist anymore. But it does. And the moment I say that, of course, people then will look at the other hand and they're like, oh yeah, that's there too. And that's the thing to me, with positive thinking, is you're forcing yourself to only look at one hand. And it's great to give it that attention and to really see that. But it doesn't mean that the other one doesn't exist. It's still there. It hasn't gone away. And a lot of people think that then, if I'm not a big proponent of positive thinking, then what am I doing? But actually, what I want to look at is I want to bring both of those into view. I want to be looking at both. And actually, I want to see from what of those both are in front of me. I want to see what's true, what's accurate, what's real, and what's being made up, because most of the time it's being made up. And I want to be honest with myself where that's concerned. If you've listened to the first episode of Coming to Your Senses, you'll know that in the early 2000s, I experienced a breakdown. I tried different therapies, but it was coaching that truly helped me transform my life. Initially, when I discovered coaching, though, I couldn't afford it. And it was a kind soul who sponsored me not only to have coaching, but also to train and become a coach. And my promise to them was that I would pay it forward. And I've done that in many ways over the years, initially through social media and private Facebook group called Confidence Revolution, and also through Coming to Your Senses, the podcast. But it triggered for me a passion to really want to make and create a secure, supportive space for people to be able to come together and have conversations that transform their lives. So I created the Conscious Conversations community. It's a group where we meet on more than once a month. We have a focused theme which is guided by the community and facilitated by me. There's hundreds of hours of learning and resources and materials to help you transform your life in a like-minded space. Because I get passionate about it, and because this was my promise to pay it forward, I'm offering you the opportunity to trial it for £1 for the first month. If that appeals to you, then head to juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer. juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer to explore what's available for you through being part of a conscious community. I know from my perspective and nearly 20 years of working as a coach and my own lived experience is that for many people, when we are looking to be positive all the time, what we're attempting to do is cover up, it's hide, it's suppress what's actually going on. And that could be because we're worried about people judging us, or we're worried about people knowing what's really going on, or if we have been the happy person with our life going perfectly and all of a sudden it's not, there's an image that we're then looking to protect. And I think the misunderstanding around that, and why I encourage people to bring both hands in front of them, is because the misunderstanding is that it's an either or. I'm either being positive or I'm negative. And it's like, well, no, bring them both in front of you and let's look at what's real versus what the thinking is making up and dramatizing, because it will be adding its own flavor of drama to it based on wherever you're coming from. And for me now, I'm very much about not arguing with reality. I may not like reality. I may not like how things are right now, but arguing with it, as I've heard many professional coach say, argue with reality, and you're only going to lose 100% of the time. So I live in the north of England, in the UK, in Europe, and it is, as I record this, at the beginning of June, and I walked in this morning with a little summer jacket on, and I'm now sat here in the office, and I've got goosebumps because it's gone cold. I love heat, I love warmth, but if I argue with it, oh well, it's June and it should be sunny and it should be warm by now, and blah 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 blah, and I'm not talking about the climate conversation. This has been my experience. I'm 50 odd years old now. This has been my experience throughout my life in the UK. That doesn't matter what month of the year, people moan about it in the UK in March when it's boiling hot and they're like, oh, it shouldn't be this hot right now. But it is. And then they'll moan about it when it snows in October or something. It just is what it is. And we need to start looking at our own life that way and be far more honest. And one of the things that prompted me looking at this topic specifically today is last week I've ended up going and watching the movie Salt Path twice. And not because I like going and watching a movie at the cinema twice, but I just was in two different environments and both people wanted to go and watch it, and it's a good movie, so I went and watched it. But I've also started reading the book. And something that really strikes me, if you don't know the story of the Salt Path, is it's written by Raina Wynn and her husband Moth in 2013, I think it was, through an investment that went a bit haywire. They ended up losing everything: their house, their business, because they ran a B&B, their farm, their livelihood, and their home all went within a week. They had to get everything out and find places to store that, sell that, and a place to live. And what strikes me about the way, it's Raina that's written the story, but what strikes me, she's not trying to be positive about it all, and she's not trying to be all positive thinking it's all going to be fine. But equally, she's not really caught in the victim story of it's not fair, why is this happening to me? Yes, absolutely. She's distraught at losing the home that her and her husband have spent many years rebuilding and creating. And there's an unjust system of the evidence that they had because they submitted it too late, quote unquote, by the judge's rules, that it meant that they lost everything. But what I find fascinating with the story and the way that she writes it is she's not caught in that everything's going to be rosy and shiny and clappy, wonderful. Neither is she caught of they're all bastards and how dare they look at what they did to us. She spends a lot of time talking about what is. And what's interesting is they don't know where they're going. Metaphorically and literally, they have a potential end destination on the path. But post that, they've no idea. So they're just going to keep walking. And every day, they don't know where they're going to sleep. They don't know how much money they're going to have. They don't know how they're going to afford food. And it's really fascinating to me looking at it through the lens of they are literally just dealing with what is. And for them, in that part of their journey and what they're talking about, and it's a literal journey as well as an internal journey, but they're being honest. It's cold, it's wet, it's miserable, and the birds that they're seeing are beautiful, and the fact that they are surrounded by wildlife is amazing. Those two things coexist, and I think that that's a big part of the problem when people are being caught in the world of positive thinking. And that's why, for me, being positive around my health actually tripped me up, because it meant that I was ignoring things that needed my attention. And I think that we get caught in this world of we're either positive or we're negative, but actually what we want to look at is bring both of those in front of us. That's why I use the hand analogy. And as Ray Wynn writes, I think, so beautifully in her book is just dealing with what is. There's no meaning attached to it. There's no judgment attached to it. It's about dealing with what is and going from that point. And sometimes that meant they had money for food, and sometimes it meant they went to a soup kitchen, and sometimes they found generosity from strangers, and other times they found judgment from strangers. It's the whole purpose of us coming to our senses is about being here, being in this moment. It's not wrong that I'm colder now than I was a few hours ago. It just is. And I can do something about that once I've finished recording the podcast. And that's the point is if you take a moment and take a deep breath, regardless of what you're doing right now, because even if you're driving a car or you're listening to this whilst you're at the gym, you can still take a nice deep breath. And if you're honest with yourself, doesn't have to be broadcast to the world, doesn't have to be shared with anyone. Be honest with yourself. What do you know needs your attention in your life? And this is the thing that I find fascinating and love so much about my work as a coach, is that in a one-on-one conversation with people, is people know what they need to do. Very high pitch there. People know, but they do. We know the answer when we're being really honest with ourselves and not trying to mask it with a victim story or a positive high energy story. When we're really honest, we know. So whether that is your finances, your health, your career, your work, your family, your relationship, your friends, whatever it is, when you're really honest with what needs attention, give it your attention. So I became very aware last year that actually my social life, because business was so wonderfully busy and I was really excited launching the podcast, and I was trialing new things and learning new stuff, that actually my social life then took a back burner because basically I was working, walking the dog, or doing stuff in the house. That was kind of my life. And I realized that I was missing out on being with people I wanted to be around. So this year it was like, okay, that's partly why I've gone to the cinema twice this year, in the last 7 days, is because I just want to spend more time with people that I enjoy spending time with. So that's had my attention. And funnily enough, that therefore then has grown, and it's been a really enjoyable experience of what is it that I want to do? How do I want to spend that time? So when you give something your attention honestly, and it may not be, as my social life was not where I would like it to be. And I can tell you that many, many years ago, I would have been caught in, it's not fair, I'm not getting invited to stuff, and other people have got families or friends they're spending time with, or loved ones that blah, 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 blah. That story is not helpful. Neither is, it's all going to be fine, it's all rosy. It's just what is. Well, what is I'm caught in my work, so therefore something needs some adjustment. We need to stop getting caught in trying to force ourselves to be better, feel better about things, and actually be honest with what is and go, yeah, okay, this is not where I want it to be. So what can I do about it? And there's two paths with that. You can either do something about it, and that may be many micro steps in order to be able to do something and get it more in a direction that you want to. Or being honest is, actually, there's nothing I can do about it either ever or right now. And if it's a right now, I can't do anything, is then keep checking back in with it once a week, once a month. Can I do anything about it now? Yes. Do something? No. Okay. Let me check back in at another point. And that's the honesty about it. Whether it is to do with what's in your bank account or what's on the scales or how your friendships or social life is you can do something about it or you can't. But be honest with yourself. What I find a real challenge in these podcasts is actually, I have to keep stopping myself because I want to launch into a ton of coaching questions to give you something, as well as the content that you can take away and that you can apply. And mainly, it's because I am so bowled over by the transformation of my life. And it's not through positive thinking, it's through action or recognizing that I can't take the action either at the moment or at all. But it's also watching others transform their lives in so many different ways, whether that's, I'm thinking of a particular client who just in our very initial conversation decided he was going to stop drinking alcohol, and hasn't touched alcohol since. And it blows my mind the kind of transformation that we can have when, instead of being positive and just trying to force ourselves to feel better, we can actually be honest and do something about it. And, you know, when I reflect on this, when I was thinking about writing this, and it was inspired by, if you ever get to listen to this, Wyn, it was very much inspired by listening to your book and how you weren't caught in the forcing yourself to feel better, and you weren't caught in a full-on victim mode about the situation. You were being honest with what is and what can we do from this point moving forward. And it got me thinking about my previous life, however many years ago it was, when I was married. And before I met my husband and discovered personal development, I was in, if you haven't listened to the first episode of the podcast, then I'd share a lot more about that back there. But I had hit a rock bottom and I was very much caught in the victim world. And then I discovered personal development. And I remember my ex-husband saying something to me as a compliment of, you're just a positive queen, because everything's going to be fine. I've got this. I can do this. It was all that sort of affirmation. But it was tiring because it was relentless. And I really needed to force that energy into being. Whereas now what I practice, and it is a practice, can't say that I've got this licked, but it is a practice about being honest with what is, so that I can deal with the actuality of life rather than this impression, this false impression of either victim or positivity of life. And what I've noticed is through that practice of dealing with what is, being honest, practicing that art of being honest, is life has become easier. Doesn't mean to say that everything's easy. It doesn't mean to say that I don't have messy stuff to deal with, but it's certainly become easier, and it's certainly become lighter. And that's on offer for you too, but not through this forced positive thinking. It's only on offer when you're honest with yourself. And that way, then you can live a far more clearer, lighter way of life. And that way you can live with far more clarity, be in a far more grounded life, just by coming to your senses and dealing with what is. Thank you for listening to this episode of Coming to Your Senses. You know, when you live this way, you've definitely got the opportunity of living with far more clarity and honesty, and life being more grounded, basically. And that's, to me, what happens when you come to your senses. So if this episode has resonated with you, then please do remember to, whatever channel that you're listening to this on, like, subscribe, and if you can, leave a comment or a review. It's so valuable, and I'm so grateful for those of you that do and have done that. But also remember to share it with somebody, someone that you know could do, who's maybe caught up in that, trying to feel and think better about life. And you can see that actually it's doing them a bit of a disservice. Or maybe it's even someone who's caught in that, woe is me, life is hard and it shouldn't be this way. Share this episode with them. Give them the opportunity to start living in a way that can be far more resourceful for them. Invite them to come to their senses, just as you have come to yours. And I look forward to speaking to you again on another episode very soon.